The morning after the night scare came too soon. I don't remember falling asleep. One minute I was sitting on my cot, journal in my lap, lantern flickering beside me. The next, sunlight burned through the canvas and my whole body jerked awake like I'd been shaken. For a second, just one, I forgot where I was. But then the sounds trickled in, the dull hum of the generator, boots scuffing outside, metal clanking in the mess tent, the constant whir of heat insects. Vietnam. The memory of the night snapped back instantly. Danny trembling in Cruz's arms, the gunshots that weren't real threats, the jungle going silent in that terrifying, unnatural way. My heart beat harder as my brain replayed the moment I thought we were back under attack. I pushed myself upright, feeling older than I had any right to at 19. Harper sat across from me, already awake. His rifle lay across his knees, wiped clean, his boots laced tight. He looked like he hadn't slept either, though he tried to hide it behind a controlled stillness. Cruz was kneeling again, rosary wrapped tightly around his fingers, too tightly. His knuckles were white. Danny lay on his cot, curled toward the wall, eyes wide open. The way he stared at nothing told me he hadn't slept at all. Ellis wasn't in the tent. I figured he was checking in with medical or burying himself in work to avoid thinking about what he couldn't fix. Price was a question mark. Sometimes he woke before dawn and sat outside alone, sharpening his knife in that slow, rhythmic way that made the blade look like part of him. Sometimes he just vanished. Today, he was gone. Harper finally spoke, his voice rough, as if scraped raw. "The brief was yesterday," he said quietly. "Today, we try to get our heads straight." "What does that even mean?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. "It means we're still here," he said, "and Rivers isn't." That landed heavier than I wanted it to. Cruz finished his prayer with a quick sign of the cross. "Rivers is alive," he murmured half to himself. "But he's not here," Harper replied gently, "and that's different." Cruz nodded because he knew Harper was right. Danny looked up finally, turning just enough for us to see the exhaustion carved into his face. "I dreamed about him," Danny whispered. "He was calling for help, but I couldn't move. I couldn't—" His voice broke. Cruz put a hand on his shoulder. Danny didn't flinch this time. Good sign? Hard to tell. Before any of us could say anything else, a shout echoed across the camp. "Mail call!" Everything stopped. Every head turned. For a moment, the war seemed to hold its breath. Mail was oxygen in Vietnam. Letters from wives, mothers, girlfriends, siblings. They were pieces of a world that still made sense. A world with normalcy, laughter, birthdays, Sunday dinners, quiet mornings. Mail meant someone still remembered your name. Harper stood first. "Let's go!" Cruz and I followed right behind him. Danny hesitated, but then pushed himself upright and trailed close, like a child afraid to be left behind. We reached the mail table just as a cluster of soldiers crowded around, hands outstretched, voices rising with hope and impatience. The clerk tossed envelopes one at a time, calling out last names. "Reed! Johnson! Martinez!" Soldiers grabbed letters like lifelines. "Colton!" Harper raised his hand. The clerk tossed him 2 envelopes. Harper stared at them for a moment, his jaw tightening. I wondered what they said. I wondered who wrote them. But Harper never shared unless he wanted to, and he almost never wanted to. "Cruz," Cruz muttered, "Gracias," as he accepted his letter. His hands trembled slightly. "Dana." Danny blinked before stepping forward. Yes, here." He received a medium-sized envelope, thicker than most. His eyes widened just a bit, like he wasn't sure whether to smile or break down. "Thompson!" My stomach dropped. I stepped forward, accepting the stack handed to me. 2 letters, One from Mary, one from my brother. My throat tightened. Then, "Price!" the clerk called. We all turned. Price wasn't there. The clerk held a thick bundle of letters in one hand, tied loosely together with string. It was far more mail than anyone else's. At least 8 or 9 envelopes, all of them worn at the edges, as if they'd been forwarded more than once. The clerk scanned the crowd. "Price? Anyone?" Silence. He set the bundle aside. Something about that felt wrong, not just sad, dangerous. Price didn't avoid mail because he was busy. He avoided it because he was afraid of what waited inside it. Harper's eyes followed the bundle for a long moment before he looked away. Back at the tent, we filed in slowly, each man holding a link to the world outside Vietnam. Cruz opened his letter first, pressing the paper to his lips before reading even a word. "My sister," he murmured, smiling softly. Harper sat on his cot, staring at his envelope without opening it. His thumb traced the crease like he was memorizing it. Danny sat down gingerly, envelope in hand, expression conflicted. He turned it over twice, swallowed, and finally tore the edge open. A single Polaroid fell out first, of his mother and younger sister on their front porch. Danny froze. Cruz moved carefully to his side. "What does it say?" Danny didn't speak yet. He unfolded the letter slowly, holding it with trembling hands. I sat on my bunk, hands resting on Mary's letter. I always read hers last, like saving the sweetest part of a meal for the end. Instead, I opened the one from my brother. "Be careful out there. Mom thinks about you every day. Dad pretends he doesn't, but he does. Come home in one piece. Try not to do anything stupid." A small smile tugged at my mouth. My brother always wrote like someone trying not to show he cared, but I could hear him in every line. I folded the letter and reached for Mary's. The envelope smelled faintly like her perfume, or maybe my mind was making that up. Either way, something inside me steadied. Her handwriting was soft and looping, familiar and gentle. "I had a dream about you last night. You didn't speak in the dream. You just sat beside me with tired eyes. I don't know what that means. Maybe I miss you so much that even in sleep, I'm afraid you're drifting away." My chest tightened. "I hope you write soon. I hope you're safe. And I hope you know that when you come home, if you come home, I'll be right where I've always been." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Her letter didn't heal anything, but it reminded me that there was a world waiting, a world where my name didn't echo in gunfire or smoke. Then Danny's voice broke through the quiet. "Oh, God." We all looked up. He was staring down at the letter, tears running silently down his cheeks. Cruz moved closer. "What's wrong?" Danny's voice shook violently. "My mom, she said she wakes up at night because she hears knocking." He swallowed hard. "She says she thinks it's someone coming to tell her I'm gone." Cruz exhaled sharply. Harper froze. Even I felt something tighten around my ribs. Danny looked at us with terrified eyes. "She said she can't breathe sometimes, like she's living in my grave before it even exists." He broke completely then, sobbing into the letter, shoulders shaking, breath hitching. Cruz wrapped an arm around him, holding him tight. "You're not dead," Cruz whispered. "You're right here. You're right here with us." Harper stood slowly. "I'll go get Price," he said quietly. "He shouldn't be alone." He left the tent. For a minute, Danny just cried, the sound heavy, raw, human, in a way war tries to beat out of you. When he finally calmed enough to breathe, he looked up weakly. "I want to go home," he whispered. "I want to go home so bad." No one said anything, because we all felt it, every day, in the marrow of our bones. A minute later, Harper returned with Price. Price stepped into the tent cautiously, like the air itself might collapse around him. His eyes flicked to the bundle of letters still resting on the table in Harper's hand. "I don't want them," Price said immediately. Harper didn't move. "They're yours." "No," Price said again, voice hardening. "Not anymore." Cruz set a hand on his shoulder. "They're from people who love you, hermano." Price flinched. "People who loved who I was." He stepped back. "I'm not that person anymore." The room went completely still. Even Danny stopped crying. Price looked at each of us with a hollow kind of honesty. "Before we came out here, I got a letter from home. My best friend died." He swallowed hard. "The one I enlisted with. The one who was supposed to watch my back." The silence deepened. "They wrote about the funeral," Price continued. "The flag, the folded triangle, the sound of taps." His jaw clenched. "I read it under a flashlight, and that night I promised myself I'd never open another letter again." Harper stepped forward slowly. "Price." "No," Price whispered. "I can't do that again. I can't sit here and read about another person I love dying while I keep breathing." He looked away, eyes glistening in the thin morning light. Danny wiped his face. "Then don't read him alone," he whispered. "Let us help you." Price's eyes flicked to him. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then, very slowly, Price's shoulders sagged, and he whispered, "Okay." Harper handed him the bundle. Price took it with trembling hands. He didn't open them yet, but he held them tight, as if he finally understood he didn't have to carry this part alone. I sat back on my cot, Mary's letter warm in my hand, and wrote a single line in her journal. "War doesn't just break bodies, it breaks ties. Letters keep us human, even when we no longer recognize the people reading them." The day had only begun, but Part 5 had truly started. The rest of the morning moved like we were wading through thick mud. Nothing felt real, nothing felt steady. The sun climbed higher, turning the base into an oven of heat and dust. But inside our tent, it felt cold. Cold in that quiet, invisible way trauma chills a room. Price sat on the edge of his cot with the unopened bundle of letters in his lap, turning them over slowly, as if the paper itself might betray him. Danny lay back on his bunk, the Polaroid of his mother and sister pressed against his chest, fingers locked tight around it. Cruz stood at the tent entrance, eyes lowered, whispering prayers under his breath. Ellis came back around late morning, smelling faintly of antiseptic. His hands were clean now, but raw and red from how hard he'd scrubbed them. He took one look around the tent and said nothing. He didn't have to. He could see it in all of us. Something inside the group had shifted, something fragile. Harper returned last, dust still clinging to his uniform from whatever inspection he'd done around camp. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if he were choosing each footfall carefully. He took a seat on an overturned ammo crate, sighing heavily. "Mail day," he murmured, "brings out ghosts." "Ghosts were already here," Ellis muttered. Silence settled again. For a while, no one knew what to do. Men trained for war don't know how to fight feelings, fear, guilt, longing, shame, bullets we can handle. Emotion, that's the real minefield. Price stared at the floor, jaw tight. He held the bundle of letters like they were explosives he couldn't defuse. His hand shook each time his fingers pressed the string that bound them. I sat opposite him, my own letters folded neatly inside my breast pocket. I'd reread Mary's words twice by now, each time picturing her at our kitchen table, pen tapping against the paper, probably worrying more than she admitted. I wanted to write her back immediately, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say? I'm safe? I wasn't. I'm okay. I wasn't. I'm still me. I wasn't sure anymore. Danny broke the silence first. "What do we do now?" he whispered. He wasn't talking about the letters. He was talking about everything. Harper leaned back, rubbing his temples. "We regroup," he said. "We get ready for tomorrow." Danny's eyes widened. "Tomorrow? We're going back out tomorrow?" Harper met his gaze. "Orders don't stop because we're hurting." Cruz swallowed hard. "Hurting is the only thing we're doing." Ellis nodded slowly. "This is war. The Army doesn't schedule recovery time." "But maybe it should," Danny whispered, voice cracking. Harper's face softened, a rare thing. "I know, but this place doesn't care. The war doesn't pause for us to catch our breath." Price let out a low breath, almost a laugh, bitter, hollow. "Catching breath? That's a luxury." He finally lifted the bundle of letters. We said you'd help me read these," he said quietly. Cruz sat beside him, eyes gentle. "Si, hermano, we're right here." Price hesitated, a long, shaking pause where he seemed torn between wanting to know and wanting to stay ignorant forever. Then he tugged the string loose. 8 envelopes spilled out onto his lap, each worn and creased, some with dirt smudges, others with tears in the corners. They'd been chasing him through bases, forwarded from one camp to another, carried by clerks who probably didn't know the weight they held. The first was addressed in looping handwriting. "From my sister," Price murmured. He opened it slowly, like someone defusing a trap. Ellis, Cruz, Danny, Harper, and I all leaned in, not invading, joining, holding a piece of the burden without asking for credit. Price unfolded the letter. His eyes scanned the page for several seconds before his lips parted in a soft sigh. She says, the baby was born." His voice cracked. "A girl," Cruz smiled. "A niece? That's beautiful." Price nodded, but tears filled his eyes. "She said she wished I was there," he whispered. "Said they named her Nadia after our grandmother." He looked up at us. "I didn't even know my sister was pregnant." No one spoke. Price wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and reached for the next envelope. This one from his mother. He didn't open it. He just held it, staring at the handwriting like it might hurt him. "I'm not ready," he murmured. "That's okay," I said softly. "One at a time." Price placed the second letter aside and reached for a third, from an old friend. He opened it quickly, almost impatiently. His breath hitched after reading the first few lines. "He's gone," Price whispered. "Another one from back home." Danny froze. "What?" "He enlisted with me," Price said. He didn't make it out of basic. Training accident. They told me he'd dropped from heat stroke, but—" Price shook his head, hands trembling. "It doesn't make sense. He was stronger than any of us." Ellis sat forward. "Sometimes strength isn't enough." Price didn't respond. He just let the letter fall to the floor. I picked it up quietly and placed it back on his cot. He didn't notice. He opened the next envelope, and the next. 3 more deaths, 2 sicknesses in his family, one neighbor writing to tell him his dog, his childhood dog, had died peacefully in the yard. Price swallowed hard, voice barely audible. "Everything's changing, and I'm not there." Cruz placed a hand on his back. "You don't have to face this alone, not anymore." Danny wiped his face with his sleeve. "We're here," he whispered. "We're all here." For the first time since I'd known him, Price looked young, not hardened, not sharp, not invincible, just a young man holding too much. He held up the final letter. "This one," his voice shook. "This one's from my father." He stared at it for a long time. "My father doesn't write letters," he said softly. "Not ever." Ellis leaned forward. "You want us to stay while you read it?" Price nodded. He opened it slowly, hands trembling. His eyes scanned the page, scanned again, then again. When he finally spoke, the words were small. He says he's proud of me. Silence. He says he never said it enough, that he wishes he'd been better at that, better at all of it. He says he hopes I make it home, and if I don't, he says he'll still be proud. The letter slipped from Price's hand and fell into his lap. He didn't cry. He just closed his eyes and whispered, "I didn't know he felt that way." Cruz squeezed his shoulder. "Now you do." Harper let out a long breath through his nose, like he'd been holding it for minutes. Ellis rubbed his eyes. "That's a hell of a letter." Danny sniffed. "I'd give anything to get a letter like that." Price finally opened his eyes. The tears didn't fall, but they were there, bright and unhidden. "Thank you," he whispered to all of us, for being here." "You don't have to thank us," I said. "That's what we do." Price nodded slowly, the weight of the letter still pressing against him, but no longer crushing him. For a few minutes, the tent felt lighter, not healed, not fixed, but lighter. That didn't last long. A sudden voice called out from outside, "Platoon briefing in 15 minutes." We all stiffened. Harper stood. "They're sending us back out." Danny paled. "Already?" Cruz closed his eyes. "Dios mío." Ellis shook his head. "We need more time." Harper didn't answer, because we all knew the truth. We weren't getting time. We weren't getting space. We weren't getting healing. We were getting sent back out into the valley, into the jungle, into the place that still held pieces of us. Price wiped his face, straightened his uniform, and tucked his letters into his shirt pocket like armor. "We move," he whispered, and for the first time, I believed him. The air inside the tent felt heavier after the briefing call, like someone had taken all the oxygen and replaced it with dread. You could see it settle into each face. Harper trying to mask it with discipline, Cruz fighting it with prayer, Ellis burying it under routine, Danny frozen with fear. He didn't bother hiding anymore. Even Price, hardened as he was, looked shaken in a way he didn't want anyone to notice. But we noticed. We were starting to see through each other too easily. Harper stood first. He wasn't barking orders like Rivers. He didn't have Rivers' command presence, but he had something else. Quiet authority, the kind that didn't need volume, only steadiness. "Get your gear," Harper said. "We move in 15. Danny flinched. "We're going back to the valley?" "No," Harper said. "Different direction. Southeast quadrant, but close enough to feel it breathing on the back of your neck." That didn't comfort anyone. Cruz ran a hand over his face. "We just buried the memory of yesterday." "War doesn't bury anything," Ellis said as he strapped on his gear. "It recycles it." Price remained seated for a moment, the bundle of letters tucked into his breast pocket. He patted it once, almost like reassurance, then stood quickly. Too quickly, like staying still even a second longer, made him feel vulnerable. "I'm good," he muttered. "Let's just go." But none of us were good. We filed out of the tent, boots kicking up dirt, weapons slung low, helmets hanging heavy on our heads. The air outside shimmered with heat, thick enough to chew. The sun had already climbed high, turning every shadow sharp. Other platoons were preparing too. Some men laughed to hide the tension, others smoked in silence. A few sat on crates, rereading letters. Everyone had their own ritual before stepping into a place where life became a coin flip. We gathered near the briefing table, Hargrove standing over another map, Mallory at his shoulder. Hargrove's eyes were bloodshot. Maybe he hadn't slept either. "Listen up," he said. "You're sweeping the southeastern trail. We've had reports of movement, not large numbers, but enough to warrant a check." VC? Harper asked. Likely, Hargrove replied, but minimal. Recon says tracks showed only 2 or 3 pairs of boots. Could be scouts. Scouts didn't scare me. Scouts warned the ones who did. You're not engaging unless fired upon, Mallory added. Your eyes and ears today. That felt like a lie. We were never just eyes and ears. Harper nodded. Understood. Hargrove exhaled. Good. And Harper, Rivers wouldn't have trusted you if he didn't think you were ready. Harper's throat tightened invisibly. He nodded again, but didn't speak. We turned to leave when Hargrove called after us. And boys, keep your heads. This part of the jungle doesn't like being disturbed. That was the closest thing to prayer we were going to get. We moved out in formation, Harper leading with Price close behind him, eyes scanning every inch of jungle. Cruz walked near Danny, murmuring something soft in Spanish to calm him. Ellis stayed near me, gear clinking softly with each step. The southeastern path wasn't as thick as the valley trail, but the air was still suffocating. The trees leaned closer here, arching overhead like ancient ribs forming a cage. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in thin slivers, catching dust and spores, floating in the air. Every sound snapped too loud. The crunch of leaves beneath our boots, the distant drone of insects, the occasional bird call that made Danny jump. Slow your breathing, Cruz whispered to him. In through your nose, out through your mouth. I'm trying, Danny muttered. His voice trembled. I moved closer to them. We've got your back? He nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. Price paused suddenly, one hand raised. We froze. The jungle froze with us. What is it? Harper whispered. Price crouched, fingers brushing a patch of dirt. He frowned. Boot prints, he murmured. Light ones, recent. Harper knelt beside him. One man? 2, Price corrected. 1 carrying gear. Heading where? Cruz whispered. Price pointed east, toward the river. Harper looked at us. We're following. We continued forward, stepping carefully around the tracks. The jungle thinned slightly, giving way to a slope that dipped toward a small riverbed. Water trickled quietly, glinting beneath the filtered sunlight. Ellis exhaled. Feels too quiet. Too safe, Cruz added. Nothing's safe here, Harper muttered. Price studied the ground again, frowning deeper. The prints stop here. How? Danny whispered. Where would they go? Price pointed across the river. Sure enough, faint impressions marked the mud on the opposite side. Jump the rocks, Price said. Didn't want to leave deep tracks. Harper nodded. They know what they're doing. We crossed carefully, using the stones to avoid leaving prints of our own. Cruz slipped once, catching himself on a tree root. Danny reached out instinctively. You good? Danny asked. Cruz nodded. See, just wet. We climbed the opposite bank when Harper froze again, holding up his hand. The air around us shifted, like it thickened suddenly. Sound faded. Even the river felt quieter. We waited. 1 second, 2, 3, then, faintly, a voice, not English, not loud, spoken softly, almost like a whisper, just beyond the ridge ahead. Danny paled instantly. That's VC, Price finished quietly. Harper held up 3 fingers, 3 of them, or 3 voices, or 3 words we didn't understand. Slowly, Harper motioned for us to move left, up the ridge, staying low. The brush rustled slightly under our boots, but we moved like shadows. As we climbed, the voices grew a little, louder, still quiet, still cautious, but unmistakable. Then we reached the top. 2 Viet Cong soldiers, scouts, stood 20 yards ahead, crouched beside a fallen tree trunk. One held binoculars, scanning the direction we'd come from. The other scribbled something into a small notebook. Harper raised his hand to signal halt. Price's knuckles whitened around his rifle. Cruz froze, breath hitching. Danny trembled so violently the leaves beside him shook. Ellis mouthed a single word, "Scouts." Harper lowered his rifle slightly, not raising it, not pointing it, just holding it ready. He whispered, "We moved back slowly." But Danny's foot slipped, just a tiny slide on loose dirt, just enough to send a pebble tumbling down the slope. It clicked against a root. One VC turned sharply. His eyes widened. He opened his mouth. Price fired first, one shot, then two. Both scouts dropped before they could scream. For a moment, everything went silent. Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Harper grabbed Price's shoulder. "What the hell was that?" "They saw us," Price replied, voice flat. "They were going to alert a whole unit." "We don't know that," Harper snapped. Price's jaw clenched. "We do now." Danny stood frozen, staring at the bodies, two young men who probably hadn't wanted to be here either. Cruz crossed himself, trembling. Ellis checked the ridge, scanning desperately for any sign that more were coming. "We need to move," Harper muttered, "now, before anyone hears those shots." We turned to retreat, but it was too late. A distant shout echoed through the trees, then another, then the unmistakable crackle of radio static, faint but close. Harper's eyes flashed. They heard. We moved fast, rushing back toward the river, boots pounding, breath ragged, heart slamming against our ribs. Danny stumbled twice. Cruz dragged him up each time. Ellis kept looking over his shoulder, his eyes full of a fear I'd never seen in him. Price stayed near Harper, watching every angle, every branch, every shadow with killing precision. We reached the river, splashing across the stones just as another shout echoed behind us. Then the first bullet snapped past my ear. I ducked instinctively. "Go!" Harper yelled. We sprinted. The jungle closed around us, swallowing our footsteps, our voices, our fear. Bullets cracked the air behind us. Cruz prayed loudly now. Ellis shouted for Danny to keep moving. Price fired blindly behind us to slow pursuit. Harper carved a path with sheer force of will. We didn't stop until the base perimeter wire glinted through the trees like salvation. We crashed through, gasping, soaked in river water and sweat, collapsing into cover as guards raised rifles in confusion. "What happened?" someone yelled. Harper managed two words between breaths. "Scout contact." We all dropped to the ground, lungs burning, hearts pounding, bodies shaking. Back in the tent, after the chaos settled, after the shouting died, after Danny stopped sobbing and Cruz stopped praying, after Ellis stopped pacing and Price stopped trembling, I wrote a single line in Mary's journal. "Letters show you the world you left behind. The jungle shows you the world you can't escape. And today, both felt too close to losing." Night fell hard and fast after the run back to base, dropping over the camp like someone had thrown a heavy blanket over the sky. The heat didn't fade, and neither did the pounding in my chest. Even lying on my cot, boots half off, rifle leaning where I could grab it without thinking, my body refused to settle. Harper sat at the small wooden table in the corner of the tent, elbows on the surface, head bowed. He wasn't praying, he wasn't asleep. He was just still, like a man carrying the weight of leadership he never asked for. His new role, River's absence, Price's unraveling, Danny's fear, it all showed in the way his shoulders slumped just slightly forward. Cruz was finally asleep. The rosary dangled loosely between his fingers, rising and falling with each tired breath. Every few moments, his lips twitched, whispering prayers into dreams he would never remember. Ellis sat on his bunk, cleaning his glasses with slow, methodical movements. The lenses were already spotless, but he kept wiping them anyway, like he needed something to fix, even if nothing was broken. Price sat in the darkest corner of the tent, knees drawn up, the bundle of letters resting beside him. He hadn't opened another one since earlier. He didn't need to. He'd heard enough truth for one day. His face was unreadable, his silence louder than any words he could have spoken. And Danny? Danny lay curled under his thin blanket, clutching the Polaroid of his mother and sister against his chest like a lifeline. His body shook every now and then, small tremors of a boy who had gone past fear into something deeper, something raw, something that didn't heal overnight. I reached for Mary's journal. The leather felt warm despite the cool night. Familiar, safe, in a strange way, the only piece of home I could hold without breaking. I opened to the next blank page. The lantern flickered overhead, casting long shadows that swayed across the canvas. For a moment, the tent didn't feel like a tent. It felt like a confession booth. Today, I wrote slowly, we ran from death, and then we ran from silence. I don't know which one scared me more. The pen hovered, trembling in my hand. We read letters from home, some filled with love, some filled with loss. And for a moment, it felt like the world outside this jungle remembered us. But then the shot started, and the jungle reminded us who we are now. The lantern hissed. Crews shifted. Harper exhaled softly, that tired kind of breath that belongs to men who carry too much. None of us came back the same today, I continued. Not from the valley, not from the letters, not from the run to the wire. I looked around the tent. Danny's trembling, Price's stillness, Cruz's whispered prayers, Ellis's empty stare, Harper's responsibility cutting into his spine like a blade. I don't know who will be tomorrow, I wrote, but I know this. Whatever's coming next, we'll face it together, even if the world tries to tear us apart. I closed the journal. The lantern guttered once, then steadied. Outside, the jungle sang again, not loudly, not peacefully, but consistently, a reminder that morning would come, a reminder that danger never left. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid of the dark. The fear would return. The ghosts would return. The war would return. But tonight, we were still here, still breathing, still together, still human, and that was enough to carry us into whatever Part 6 would bring.